The night was alive with the howling of wolves as the giant Thrym, ruler of Jotunheim, sat upon his stolen prize, Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir. He demanded the goddess Freyja as his bride in exchange for its return. The gods gathered in desperate council, knowing without Mjolnir, their world would fall to chaos, but Freyja, eyes blazing like golden fire, refused. She would not be bartered like treasure. The halls of Asgard trembled with her fury, and even Odin hesitated before her wrath. This was no passive love goddess. This was Freyja, a deity of unmatched power, passion, and mystery. And that's just the beginning. Today, we're pulling back the veil on one of Norse mythology's most captivating figures. Freyja isn't just the goddess of love and beauty. She's a warrior, a sorceress, a ruler of the dead, and so much more. Hidden in the ancient sagas are secrets about her that will change how you see Norse mythology forever. Did you know she commands half the slain alongside Odin, that her tears literally turn to gold, or that her infamous necklace holds a scandalous truth even seasoned myth lovers often miss? Stick with us, because over the next 30 revelations, you'll discover why Freyja isn't just a goddess, she's a force of nature. From her shadowy origins to her surprising ties across ancient cultures, we're diving deep into the legends that paint her as the most complex figure in the Norse pantheon. Trust me, by the end, you'll never look at Friday or cats or even the night sky the same way again. Let's begin. Now here's something that might surprise you. While most mythologies separate love and war into different gods, Freyja shatters that divide completely. Picture this. One moment, she's the radiant goddess whose very presence makes flowers bloom and hearts race. The next, she's clad in armor, riding a chariot pulled by giant cats, leading warriors into battle. This isn't just some random contradiction. It's a brilliant reflection of how the Norse saw the world. To them, passion and power weren't opposites. They were two sides of the same golden coin. Freyja's battlefield role goes far deeper than most realize. While everyone knows Odin gets first pick of fallen warriors for Valhalla, few realize Freyja claims her own share. For every warrior drinking mead in Odin's hall, another feasts just as grandly in her hall, Sessrúmnir. And here's the kicker. While Valhalla is all about preparing for Ragnarök, Freyja's warriors seem to be celebrating life itself. Where Odin's hall echoes with the clang of training weapons, hers resonates with music, poetry, and the promise of renewal. This tells us something profound. The Norse didn't just glorify death in battle. They cherished what that sacrifice protected. Love and war weren't enemies. They were partners. Consider the artifacts we found. Bronze amulets showing Freyja with both a sword and a sheaf of grain. Carvings where she wears her trademark necklace, Brísingamen, while standing over a battlefield. Even her name holds clues. Freyja likely comes from an old word meaning lady, but also connects to words for beloved and to rejoice. Every layer reveals a culture that saw no shame in a woman or a goddess commanding both desire and destruction. Think about what this means compared to other ancient beliefs. Greek Aphrodite would never be caught near a battlefield. Roman Mars had nothing to do with fertility. But Freyja, she's the storm and the calm after it, the sword and the hearth. The Norse didn't just accept this duality, they revered it. Next time you hear about Viking warriors, remember, their ideal afterlife had just as much room for Freyja's feasts as Odin's fights, because to them, a life well lived needed both. But speaking of Freyja's legendary necklace, let's pull back the curtain on one of Norse mythology's most provocative myths. The story of Brísingamen isn't just about dazzling jewelry. It's a raw, unfiltered glimpse into how the Norse viewed power, desire, and female agency. Picture this scene deep in Svartalfheimr, the shadowy realm of dwarves. Freyja stumbles upon four master craftsmen forging a necklace so radiant it could outshine the sun itself. Not one to mince words, she demands it. but these dwarves named Alfrig, Dvalin, Berlinga, and Greer drive a hard bargain. They don't want gold or favors. They want her. Each demands a night with the goddess in exchange for their craftsmanship. And here's where things get fascinating. Freyja doesn't hesitate. She accepts their terms one by one and walks away with Brísingamen gleaming at her throat. Now, medieval Christian scribes clutching their pearls labeled this as sheer promiscuity. But look deeper, this myth is really about autonomy. Freyja isn't tricked or coerced. She makes a deliberate trade, her body, her choice. In a society where marriages were often political alliances, this story flips the script. It shows a goddess who owns her sexuality as boldly as she wields her sword. And that necklace, it's more than adornment. Brísingamen becomes a symbol of Freyja's irreducible power. When Loki later steals it, her wrath shakes the foundations of Asgard. She doesn't mourn the loss as some lovesick maiden. She threatens war unless Odin intervenes. That's the real magic here. The dwarves may have forged the metal, but Freyja's will made it legendary. Archaeology backs this up. Scandinavian graves from the Viking Age show high-status women buried with ornate brooches and bead necklaces. These weren't just pretty trinkets, they signaled authority, the kind that could command a fleet or negotiate treaties. Freyja's myth mirrors this reality. A woman's worth wasn't diminished by her sexual freedom. It could be the very source of her strength. Compare this to other mythologies. Greek Persephone is dragged to the underworld against her will. Egyptian Isis must scheme to reclaim her husband's body. But Freyja, she enters bargains with her eyes wide open. The Norse didn't just tolerate female desire. They wove it into their cosmology as a force as natural and formidable as thunder. So next time you hear Brísingamen reduced to a scandal, remember. In a single myth, Freyja dismantles the idea that power and femininity can't coexist. She wears her choices as boldly as she wears that golden torque. And that, perhaps, is the necklace's truest magic. Now let's turn our attention from jewels to another of Freyja's extraordinary treasures, one that reveals her deep ties to the mystical arts. The falcon cloak isn't just a flashy accessory. It's a key to understanding her role as a boundary crosser, a goddess who moves between worlds as effortlessly as a bird takes flight. Imagine a garment woven with feathers so light they seem made of mist. When Freyja drapes this cloak over her shoulders, her body dissolves into the form of a falcon, swift, sharp-eyed, and untouchable. This isn't mere illusion. In Norse cosmology, shapeshifting signifies profound power. It's the mark of a Völva, a seeress who navigates the 9 realms in trance states. Archaeology supports this connection. Staffs carved with bird motifs, like those found in Viking Age graves at Birka and Firkat, suggest real women practiced this kind of magic. Freyja's cloak mirrors their rituals, grounding her myth in tangible spiritual practices. But here's where it gets intriguing. The cloak isn't exclusive to her. In the Trimskvida, Loki begs to borrow it when Thor needs to infiltrate a giant's wedding disguised as Freyja herself. This detail often gets overlooked, but it's revelatory. Why would the trickster, a god infamous for his cunning, need Freyja's artifact? Because some doors only open to her magic. The giants recognize Thor's hammer or Odin's spear, but a falcon's form. That's Freyja's signature. Her cloak becomes Asgard's skeleton key, proving her magic is as vital as Odin's wisdom or Thor's strength. There's another layer. In Skaldskaparmál, Loki uses the cloak again to rescue Idun from the frost giants. Each time the gods face an impossible task, it's Freyja's power they requisition. This isn't coincidence. It positions her as the linchpin of the divine ecosystem. Where brute force fails, her fluidity succeeds. The Norse didn't just value the hammer's crush. They revered the falcon's finesse. Modern audiences might miss the symbolism, but Viking Age Scandinavians wouldn't. Falcons weren't just birds, they were psychopomps, creatures that escorted souls between realms. Freyja's dual role as love goddess and chooser of the slain makes perfect sense through this lens. Her cloak doesn't just change her shape, it reaffirms her as the gatekeeper between life and death, desire and destiny. So next time you picture Freyja, don't just see the goddess with the golden tears or the warrior's fury. See the woman who becomes the wind itself, whose magic oils the hinges of the cosmos. Because in a pantheon of gods who specialize, Freyja transcends, and that's a power no dwarf-forged jewel could ever contain. Now let's shift our focus from Freyja's magical artifacts to her formidable presence on the battlefield, a role that challenges the popular image of Valkyries as Odin's exclusive entourage. While Odin gathers his share of fallen warriors in Valhalla, Freyja claims her own in Folkvanga, her sprawling field where she welcomes half of those who die in combat. This isn't just a supporting role, it's a testament to her authority over life, death, and the delicate balance between them. Picture this, a battlefield strewn with the slain. Ravens circle overhead as spectral figures glide among the bodies, deciding who ascends to the gods' halls. Most assume these choosers answer only to Odin, but Norse lore tells a different story. Freyja, clad in her gleaming armor, selects her champions first, her right to the fallen as unchallenged as Odin's. This division of the dead isn't arbitrary. It reflects a deeper duality in Norse belief. Where Odin embodies the strategic frenzy of war, Freyja represents its raw, transformative power. Archaeology whispers confirmation of her role. Take the Berkaflicken figurine, a tiny bronze statue from Sweden depicting a woman with a spear and shield. For decades, scholars debated her identity. Was she a Valkyrie, a mortal warrior? The truth might lie in the details. Her ornate dress and commanding posture suggest divinity, while the boar imagery nearby echoes Freyja's association with the battlefield. Could this be Freyja herself, frozen in metal as she claims her chosen? The evidence leans tantalizingly toward yes, but why does this matter? Because it reshapes how we understand Norse cosmology. Valkyries weren't mindless operatives of Odin. They served a goddess whose domain spanned love and war, fertility and death. When Freyja rides among the slain, she isn't just collecting souls. She's honoring a sacred contract, one that grants her equal footing with the All-Father. This parity reveals something profound about Norse culture. They didn't compartmentalize power by gender. A goddess could command armies just as a god could practice magic, and no one batted an eye. Consider the practical implications. Warriors didn't just pray to Odin for victory. They invoked Freyja, knowing she'd guard their passage if they fell. Her Valkyries weren't passive escorts, they were extensions of her will, fierce and discerning. This dual system of afterlife selection underscores a cultural truth. The Norse didn't see death as a single destination. It was a spectrum with Freyja and Odin as complementary guides. So the next time Valkyries come to mind, remember, behind their winged helms and spears stands Freyja, her presence as vital on the battlefield as in the halls of love. Her role as chooser of the slain isn't a footnote. It's a cornerstone of her divinity, one that cements her as one of Norse mythology's most formidable forces. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most enigmatic figures in Freyja's story, her elusive husband, Other. While Freyja shines brightly in Norse mythology, Other remains a shadowy presence, often forgotten or dismissed as a mere footnote. But his absence speaks volumes. Unlike other divine couples in the pantheon, Other is rarely seen, vanishing for long stretches, leaving Freyja to weep golden tears in his absence. Who is this mysterious figure, and why does his disappearance hold such deep symbolic weight? The name Other itself offers clues. It shares a striking resemblance to Odin's name, Odin in Old Norse, suggesting a possible connection between the two. Some scholars argue that Other isn't a separate deity at all, but an aspect of Odin, a fragment of his wandering, restless nature. Think of it like this: Odin embodies the god of war, wisdom, and poetry, while other represents his untamed, emotional side. The part of him that vanishes into the wild, consumed by inspiration or madness. If this theory holds, Freyja's marriage to Other becomes a poignant metaphor for the bond between two of Norse mythology's most powerful deities, intertwining love, longing, and divine duality. But Freyja doesn't mourn passively. Her tears aren't just sorrow, they're gold, literal wealth dripping from her eyes. This imagery ties into a broader Norse tradition where emotions manifest as tangible, precious things. In skaldic poetry, grief becomes amber and love becomes mead. Freyja's golden tears, then, aren't just a personal tragedy. They're a cosmic transaction, transforming her sorrow into something of immense value. Imagine the weight of that, a goddess whose grief literally enriches the world. It's a reminder that in Norse culture, even pain could be productive, a source of prosperity as much as suffering. The myths hint at Other's cyclical returns, suggesting their relationship follows the rhythms of nature, seasons of absence followed by reunion. Some interpretations link this to agricultural cycles, where Freyja's tears fertilize the earth, ensuring bounty upon Other's return. Others see it as a reflection of human experience, the way love often involves both joy and longing, presence and absence. Either way, their dynamic challenges simplistic notions of marriage in mythology. Freyja isn't a passive wife pining for her missing husband. She's a force of nature, turning her grief into something powerful, her love into something enduring. So what does this mean for Freyja's role in the pantheon? It reinforces her complexity. She isn't just a goddess of love or war. She's a deity who transforms loss into legacy, whose emotions shape the world around her. Whether Other is Odin in another guise or a separate being entirely, his absence amplifies Freyja's agency, proving that even in myth, the most compelling stories aren't about who stays but who leaves and what remains in their wake. Now, let's uncover another layer of Freyja's mystique, her mastery of seiðr, a form of Norse magic so potent it blurred the lines between prophecy, illusion, and fate. While Freyja is often celebrated for her beauty and ferocity, her role as the foremost practitioner of seiðr reveals a deeper, more enigmatic side of her power. This wasn't just any magic. Seiðr was a sacred, complex art, tied to trance-like states, divination, and even the bending of destiny. And here's the twist, Freyja didn't keep this knowledge to herself. She taught it to Odin, the Allfather himself, despite the fact that seiðr was traditionally seen as a woman's domain, a taboo for men to practice. So what exactly was seiðr? Imagine a ritual where the practitioner, often seated on a high platform, entered a trance to commune with spirits, see the future, or influence events. It was a blend of shamanism and sorcery, requiring not just skill but immense spiritual resilience. Freyja's connection to seiðr underscores her role as a bridge between worlds, much like Odin, but with a distinctly feminine energy. The irony here is profound. Odin, the god of wisdom and war, had to learn this magic from Freyja, a Vanir goddess, suggesting that even the Allfather had gaps in his knowledge. This exchange speaks volumes about Freyja's authority. She wasn't just Odin's equal in some realms, she was his teacher in one of the most esoteric arts of their world. Archaeology adds tangible weight to these myths. Across Scandinavia, excavators have unearthed iron and bronze staffs, often intricately decorated, believed to be the tools of seiðr practitioners. The most famous of these, the staff from the grave of the Oseberg ship burial, hints at the high status of women who wielded such magic. Some scholars argue these staffs weren't just symbols, they were instruments of power, used to channel energy or mark the practitioner's connection to the unseen. When we picture Freyja performing seiðr, it's likely with a staff like this in hand, her voice weaving spells that could alter the fabric of reality. But why was seiðr taboo for men? Norse society had strict gender roles, and magic was no exception. Seiðr, with its associations of passivity, prophecy, and even seduction, clashed with the idealized masculine virtues of action and strength. For Odin to practice it despite the stigma reveals his relentless pursuit of knowledge no matter the cost, yet it also highlights Freyja's unparalleled position. She wasn't bound by such limitations. Her magic was both feared and revered, a testament to her autonomy in a pantheon where gods often struggled for dominance. The legacy of seiðr lingers in modern reconstructions of Norse paganism, where Freyja remains a central figure for those exploring these ancient practices. Her teachings to Odin remind us that wisdom isn't gendered, it's transcendent, and those iron staffs buried in the earth, they're silent witnesses to a time when magic wasn't myth but a lived reality with Freyja at its heart. Now, shifting our focus from magic to language, let's explore a secret hidden in plain sight. Every time you say Friday, you're invoking Freyja's legacy. The connection between the goddess and the fifth day of the week isn't just poetic, it's etched into the very roots of Germanic languages. In Old English, Friday was Frigdig, literally Freyja's day, a direct nod to her influence. This pattern echoes across Germanic cultures. In Old High German, it was Freitag, and in Old Norse, Freyjudagur. These linguistic threads weave a tapestry linking modern language to ancient worship, showing how deeply Freyja was woven into daily life. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The Romans named Friday Dies Veneris, or Venus's day, after their goddess of love. When Germanic peoples adopted the Roman 7-day week, they replaced Venus with Freyja, their own goddess of love, fertility, and power. This wasn't a random swap. It highlights how Freyja's domains mirrored Venus's, yet with a distinctly Norse twist. Where Venus was often idealized, Freyja embodied raw vitality, commanding both love and war. The alignment of these two goddesses across cultures reveals a universal reverence for feminine divinity tied to love and sovereignty, and Freyja's imprint on Friday lingers beyond etymology. Folk traditions across Scandinavia and Germany preserved traces of her worship well into the Christian era. In some rural areas, Friday was considered the luckiest day for weddings, a subtle echo of Freyja's blessings on love and union. Farmers would avoid shearing sheep or cutting crops on Fridays, fearing her displeasure, a vestige of her role as a fertility deity. Even superstitions about Friday being an unlucky day might flip the script. Some scholars suggest these taboos arose from Christian efforts to suppress lingering pagan practices tied to her worship. The endurance of these traditions speaks volumes. Freyja wasn't just a mythic figure, she was a living presence in the rhythms of agriculture, marriage, and timekeeping. Today, as we casually plan our weekends around Friday, we're unwittingly keeping alive a thread of reverence that stretches back over 1,000 years. It's a reminder that mythology isn't confined to ancient texts. It's embedded in our language, our rituals, and even the way we mark time. So next time you cheer for Friday, remember, you're not just celebrating the end of the work week. You're echoing a tradition that once honored one of the most powerful goddesses the Norse world ever knew. Now, let's turn to one of Freyja's most intriguing companions, her golden bristled boar, Hildisvíni. At first glance, this might seem like just another mythical creature, but there's a twist here that reveals so much about Freyja's character and the Norse worldview. According to the myth, Hildisvíni isn't just an ordinary boar, it's actually Freyja's human lover, Otter, transformed into this majestic beast. The story goes that Otter, a devoted worshipper of Freyja, sought her help to prove his noble lineage in a dispute. In response, Freyja not only aided him but turned him into her golden boar, riding him into battle and even to the halls of the gods. This isn't just a whimsical tale, it's a window into Freyja's role as a protector, a goddess who actively intervenes in the lives of her followers, blurring the lines between the divine and the mortal. But why a boar? In Norse culture, boars were far more than just animals. They were symbols of strength, fertility, and even sacred protection. warriors would feast on boar flesh in rituals, believing it granted them courage and resilience in battle. The legendary boar Sessrúmnir, for example, was said to be slaughtered and reborn daily to feed the Einherjar in Valhalla, tying the creature directly to themes of renewal and abundance. Freyja's choice of a golden boar, then, is no accident. Gold, as we've seen, is deeply linked to her, often called Freyja's tears, and here it elevates the boar to a divine status. The golden bristles shimmer with her power, merging the boar's earthly symbolism with her own celestial authority. There's also a fascinating layer here connecting Hildisvíni to fertility rites. Boars were associated with Freyja, Freyja's brother, and another major fertility god, further intertwining the two deities' domains. Some scholars suggest that Freyja riding a boar might symbolize the union of masculine and feminine energies, a ritual act meant to ensure agricultural bounty or even human fertility. This ties back to her broader role as a goddess who governs both love and the cycles of life and death. The myth of Otter's transformation, then, isn't just a quirky detail. It's a reflection of how Freyja's myths often weave together personal devotion, cosmic symbolism, and the practical needs of her worshippers. What's especially compelling is how this story contrasts with other Norse tales. While Odin or Thor might showcase their power through brute force or wisdom, Freyja's magic here is intimate and transformative. She doesn't just command loyalty, she reshapes reality for those she favors. And in doing so, she reinforces her place not just as a goddess of love, but as a deity who actively shapes destinies. So next time you picture Freyja, don't just imagine her with her necklace or cats, remember her golden boar, a creature that embodies her ability to turn devotion into divine power and mortal lives into legends. Now let's delve into one of the most pivotal moments in Norse mythology, the Aesir-Vanir War, and Freyja's surprising role in its aftermath. This conflict wasn't just a clash of gods, it was a turning point that reshaped the Norse pantheon, and Freyja's presence among the Aesir reveals a fascinating story of cultural fusion. The war itself began as a bitter struggle between the two divine factions, the Aesir associated with power and sovereignty, and the Vanir linked to fertility, nature, and magic. Freyja, as a Vanir goddess, originally stood on the opposing side, but when the war ended in a stalemate, the gods chose an unexpected path to peace and exchange of hostages. Freyja, her brother Freyja, and their father Njörður were sent to live among the Aesir, while the Aesir sent figures like Mimir and Honir to the Vanir. On the surface, this might seem like a simple truce, but it's far more profound. Freyja's integration into the Aesir pantheon symbolizes the blending of two distinct religious traditions, merging the Vanir's earthy, life-affirming magic with the Aesir's structured, warrior-centric worldview. What's particularly intriguing is how Freyja thrived in her new role. Unlike other hostages, she wasn't diminished or sidelined. She became one of the most revered figures among the Aesir, retaining her authority over love, fertility, and even war. This suggests that her presence wasn't just a political gesture, but a recognition of her indispensable power. Some scholars argue that this myth reflects a real historical process, where different Norse tribes or cultures gradually combined their beliefs, with the Vanir's fertility deities being absorbed into the dominant Aesir framework. Archaeological evidence, like artifacts blending symbols of both groups, supports this idea of religious syncretism. Freyja's seamless transition also highlights her adaptability. While other Vanir deities like Njörður and Freyja found their niches, Njörður as a god of the sea, Freyja as a god of prosperity, Freyja's domains expanded. She brought her mastery of seiðr magic to the Aesir, even teaching Odin its secrets, and her influence permeated their myths. This duality, her Vanir roots and Aesir prominence, makes her a bridge between worlds, embodying the Norse understanding that power isn't static but fluid, shaped by exchange and compromise. Theories about this merge go even deeper. Some historians propose that the Vanir might represent an older, indigenous Scandinavian religion, while the Aesir reflect the beliefs of incoming Germanic tribes. If true, Freyja's story becomes a metaphor for how cultures negotiate coexistence, preserving their core identities while creating something new. Her enduring worship, even among the Aesir, underscores how essential her qualities fertility, magic, and fierce independence were to Norse society, regardless of tribal divisions. So when we see Freyja standing alongside Odin and Thor, it's not just a mythic detail, it's a testament to the Norse genius for synthesis. They didn't erase differences, they wove them into a richer tapestry with Freyja as one of its golden threads. Up next, we'll explore how her feline companions, often overlooked, carry their own symbolic weight in her legends. Now, shifting our focus from the grand conflicts of gods to the more intimate companions of Freyja, let's turn our attention to her enigmatic chariot-pulling cats. These aren't just any felines, they're powerful symbols woven into the fabric of Norse mythology, reflecting deeper cultural beliefs and Freyja's own multifaceted nature. The image of Freyja riding a chariot drawn by two large cats is one of her most iconic depictions. These cats, often described as sleek, powerful, and golden-eyed, are believed to be Norwegian forest cats, a breed native to Scandinavia. Their robust build and thick fur made them perfectly suited for the harsh Nordic climate, and their association with Freyja hints at their sacred status. But why cats? In Norse culture, felines weren't just pets, they embodied independence, mystery, and a connection to the supernatural. Cats were seen as creatures that moved between worlds, much like Freyja herself, who traversed the realms of life, death, and magic. Diving deeper into the symbolism, these chariot-pulling cats likely represent fertility and protection. Cats were often linked to hearth and home in Norse society, guarding grain stores from rodents and thus ensuring survival. This ties back to Freyja's role as a goddess of fertility and abundance. Her cats aren't just steeds but guardians of life's essentials. Some scholars even suggest a link between Freyja's felines and earlier Germanic fertility goddesses like Nerthus, who was associated with earth and prosperity. While direct evidence is scarce, the thematic parallels are striking. Both goddesses oversee life's cyclical nature, and both are accompanied by animals symbolizing domestic and wild abundance. The connection between Freyja and cats may also extend to seiðr, her form of magic. Cats, with their keen senses and nocturnal habits, were thought to perceive spirits and hidden forces, a trait that would make them ideal companions for a goddess who practiced prophecy and trance rituals. Imagine Freyja's cats as more than mere animals. They're extensions of her power, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames of ritual fires as she channels the unseen. Interestingly, Freyja isn't the only Norse figure linked to cats. The trickster god Loki once shapeshifted into a cat to evade capture, and folklore from later periods describes trolls turning into cats to cause mischief. This duality, cats as both sacred and sly, mirrors Freyja's own complexity. She's a goddess of love and war, fertility and death, embodying contradictions that the Norse people saw reflected in the natural world. Archaeological finds further underscore this bond. Small cat figurines and amulets have been discovered in Viking graves, some placed alongside women, possibly as tokens of Freyja's protection in the afterlife. These artifacts suggest that cats held a spiritual significance beyond the myths, serving as intermediaries between humans and the divine. So the next time you picture Freyja gliding across the sky in her chariot, remember, her cats are far more than decorative. They're living symbols of her power, bridging the mundane and the mystical, just as she bridges the realms of the Aesir and Vanir. Up ahead, we'll uncover an even more surprising connection, how Freyja's legacy might stretch beyond Scandinavia, touching the sands of ancient Egypt. Now, here's something that might take you by surprise. Freyja's influence may have stretched far beyond the frozen north, all the way to the sun-baked temples of ancient Egypt. At first glance, Norse and Egyptian mythology seem worlds apart, but dig a little deeper, and you'll find intriguing threads connecting Freyja to goddesses like Bastet and Hathor. How, through the bustling trade routes of the ancient world, where ideas and deities traveled as freely as goods. Let's start with the evidence. Archaeological digs have uncovered Scandinavian amber in Egyptian tombs, some dating back to the Bronze Age. This golden resin, prized for its beauty and supposed magical properties, was traded along routes that snaked through Europe and into the Mediterranean. Where there's trade, there's cultural exchange, and with it the potential for shared myths. Could Freyja's association with gold and fertility have resonated with Egyptian worshippers of Hathor, the cow-headed goddess of love, music, and abundance? Or Bastet, the feline deity of protection and joy? The parallels are tantalizing. Take Bastet, for example. Like Freyja's chariot-pulling cats, Bastet was depicted as a lioness or domestic cat, embodying both ferocity and nurturing warmth. Both goddesses were linked to fertility and the home, and both had a playful, sensual side that defied rigid expectations. Even their tears held power. Freyja's golden tears symbolized wealth, while Bastet's were said to have healing properties. Coincidence, maybe, but when you consider that Norse and Egyptian cultures both revered solar symbolism, Freyja with her glittering necklace Brísingamen shining like the sun, and Hathor as the Eye of Ra, it's hard to ignore the echoes. Then there's Hathor, whose worship involved music, dance, and ecstatic rituals, not unlike Freyja's seiðr magic, which blended prophecy with rhythmic chanting. Both goddesses presided over love and death, guiding souls to the afterlife. Freyja welcomed half the slain to Folkvanga, while Hathor greeted the dead in the western mountains. Even their iconography overlaps. Hathor was often shown with a necklace mirroring Freyja's Brísingamen, and both were associated with cows, sacred symbols of nourishment in their respective cultures. Of course, scholars debate these connections. Some argue that similarities are just universal archetypes, not proof of direct influence. But here's the twist: a handful of artifacts suggest deeper ties. A Viking Age figurine from Sweden depicts a woman with a cat, possibly Freyja, wearing a headdress resembling Hathor's solar disk. Meanwhile, Egyptian amulets of Bastet have been found as far north as Denmark. Could these be fragments of a forgotten dialogue between pantheons? Whether through trade or sheer cosmic irony, Freyja's story seems to ripple across continents. Next time you picture her gleaming chariot, imagine it not just against Norse skies, but under the gaze of Egyptian stars, proof that even in mythology, borders are more fluid than they seem. Now let's turn the page to one of Freyja's most memorable appearances in the Poetic Edda, where her quick wit and fiery spirit steal the spotlight. The Trimskviða, or the Lay of Thrym, gives us a hilarious yet revealing glimpse of Freyja's role among the gods, and it all starts with a stolen hammer. The myth kicks off with Thor waking up to find his mighty hammer Mjolnir missing. The culprit, Thrym, a giant who demands Freyja as his bride in exchange for returning it. What happens next is pure comedy. The gods gather in panic, and Loki, ever the instigator, suggests disguising Thor as Freyja to trick Thrym. Here's where things get juicy. When they first propose the plan to Freyja, her reaction is explosive. She snorted with rage so that all the halls of the gods shook. This isn't just anger, it's a volcanic refusal that underscores her autonomy. No one, not even the gods, can casually offer her up like a bargaining chip. But the story doesn't end there. Thor, disguised in a bridal gown and veil with Loki as his cheeky maid, arrives in Jotunheim. Thrym, oblivious, gushes over his bride's fierce eyes and appetite. Thor devours an entire ox and 3 casks of mead. The giant's sister even demands a bridal gift, to which Loki quips that Freyja was too excited to sleep or eat, a nod to her passionate nature. The ruse works and Thor reclaims his hammer, but the real star is Freyja's implied presence. Her refusal to comply, even offstage, drives the entire plot. What does this tell us? First, Freyja's dialogue, though sparse, reveals her as a goddess who won't be silenced or traded. Her rage isn't just personal, it's political. In a pantheon where Odin and Thor often dominate, she asserts her independence unapologetically. Second, the fact that Thor must impersonate her highlights her irreplaceability. Giants covet her, gods rely on her, and her absence or defiance forces the divine hand. The Trimsk also subtly critiques gender roles. Thor, the epitome of masculine strength, must embody Freyja's femininity to succeed, a twist that blurs boundaries and underscores her power. Even in a farce, Freyja's influence looms large. Her brief but fiery lines in the poetic Edda remind us that in Norse mythology, she's not just a love goddess, she's a force no one can ignore. This playful yet pointed tale leaves us with a question. If Freyja's mere refusal can shake Asgard's halls, what else might she be capable of when she takes center stage? Let's explore that next. Now let's uncover another dazzling layer of Freyja's mythology, her deep bond with gold, a metal that glimmers with as much significance as her legendary necklace. In the rich tapestry of Norse poetry, gold isn't just a precious metal, it's poetically referred to as Freyja's tears, a metaphor steeped in both emotion and economics. The origin of this striking phrase ties back to the myth of her missing husband, Arthur. When Freyja weeps for him, her tears don't just fall, they transform. Those that land on hard earth become nuggets of gold, while those that touch the sea turn to radiant amber. This isn't just poetic flair, it's a brilliant fusion of Freyja's domains, love and material wealth. Her sorrow literally enriches the world, blurring the line between emotional depth and tangible value. But why gold? In Viking Age Scandinavia, gold was more than currency. It was a symbol of power, prestige, and divine favor. Arm rings, necklaces, and other golden treasures weren't just decorative. They were gifts exchanged to forge alliances, rewards for loyalty, and offerings to the gods. By linking Freyja to gold, Norse poets emphasized her role as a bestower of both emotional and material abundance. When a chieftain gifted gold to his warriors, it wasn't just payment, it was an echo of Freyja's generosity, a divine connection woven into everyday life. The tears metaphor also hints at something darker. Gold's allure came at a cost, much like Freyja's longing for Arthur. Viking raids, infamous for their pursuit of treasure, were driven by this dual desire for glory and wealth. The same gold that adorned halls and honored gods often stemmed from conflict, mirroring Freyja's duality as a goddess of love and war. Her tears, then, aren't just sorrowful, they're transformative, capable of fueling both beauty and strife. Archaeology backs this up. Hoards like the one found at Hidden Sea, Germany, brimming with Freyja-inspired jewelry, show how her symbolism permeated Viking craftsmanship. These weren't mere trinkets, they were sacred objects carrying the weight of her mythos. Even the way gold was worked, intricately woven, like the threads of fate, echoed Freyja's connection to destiny and magic. So the next time you picture Freyja, don't just see her adorned in gold, imagine her as its living embodiment. Her tears shape economies, her grief fuels artistry, and her presence turns metal into myth. This interplay of wealth and emotion reveals a goddess who doesn't just possess treasure, she is treasure in every sense of the word. Now let's journey even further back in time to uncover Freyja's ancient origins, roots that stretch far beyond Scandinavia. What if I told you that Freyja's essence might be shared with dawn goddesses from distant lands? Scholars have long noticed striking similarities between her and other divine figures from the Proto-Indo-European tradition, the common cultural ancestor of many ancient civilizations. Take Ushas, the radiant Hindu goddess of dawn. Like Freyja, she's associated with beauty, light, and renewal. Both goddesses ride chariots, Ushas' pulled by red horses, Freyja's by cats, symbolizing their power to bring light after darkness. Ushas is celebrated for her golden arms and necklaces, mirroring Freyja's famed Brísingamen. These parallels aren't coincidental. They suggest a shared mythological blueprint, one where a luminous goddess of dawn and fertility was worshipped across cultures before they diverged. Then there's Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love. While she's often compared to Freyja for their shared domains of love and desire, the connections run deeper. Both goddesses have ties to the sea. Aphrodite, born from sea foam, Freyja's tears turning to amber in the water. They also share a connection to war. Aphrodite's lover Ares mirrors Freyja's role as a chooser of the slain. Even their sacred animals overlap. Aphrodite's doves and Freyja's falcons both symbolize swiftness and divine messenger roles. But why does this matter? These connections reveal something profound about ancient spirituality. The Proto-Indo-Europeans, who spread across Eurasia thousands of years ago, likely carried with them stories of a powerful feminine divinity, a goddess of dawn, love, and sovereignty. As their descendants settled in different regions, this original figure splintered into the diverse goddesses we know today. Freyja, Ushers, and Aphrodite might all be cultural variations of the same divine archetype, adapted to local beliefs over time. Linguistic clues bolster this theory. Freyja's name shares roots with words meaning lady or beloved across Indo-European languages, similar to titles given to other goddesses. The Norse Freyja and Old English Freo both stem from the same Proto-Germanic word, just as the Sanskrit Priya means beloved. This linguistic web ties her to a much older tradition of revered feminine deities. What's fascinating is how these goddesses evolved. In colder, warrior-centric Scandinavia, Freyja retained her warlike edge alongside her fertility aspects. In Greece, Aphrodite became more focused on beauty and passion. Yet all of them preserved traces of that original, multifaceted goddess, one who governed love, light, and the cycles of life and death. This isn't just academic curiosity. Recognizing these shared roots helps us see Freyja not just as a Norse figure, but as part of a vast, interconnected tapestry of ancient belief. Her stories echo across continents, reminding us how humanity's oldest spiritual ideas traveled and transformed. So the next time you hear of dawn goddesses or love deities from distant cultures, listen closely. You might just catch whispers of Freyja's ancient legacy. Now let's step into the present and discover how Freyja's legacy lives on in the hearts and rituals of modern worshippers. While the Viking age may be long gone, Freyja's influence hasn't faded. Instead, she's found a vibrant new home in neo-pagan traditions like heathenry and Wicca. Today, she's celebrated not just as a historical figure but as a living goddess, inspiring devotion in ways that blend ancient reverence with modern spirituality. Among heathens, practitioners who revive pre-Christian Germanic traditions, Freyja holds a place of honor. Many see her as a patron of personal sovereignty and strength, embodying both fierce independence and profound compassion. Rituals often involve offerings of mead, honey, or fragrant flowers, echoing her associations with fertility and abundance. Some groups recreate blots, traditional Norse sacrifices, where they might raise a horn in her name, sharing words of praise before pouring offerings onto the earth. Others craft intricate altars adorned with symbols like amber necklaces, cat figurines, or falcon feathers, transforming small spaces into portals to her divine presence. Wiccans, too, have embraced Freyja, though often through a slightly different lens. Here, she's frequently linked to the goddess in her many forms, maiden, mother, and crone, representing the full spectrum of feminine power. Modern witches might invoke her during love spells or rites of self-empowerment, drawing on her dual nature as a goddess of both love and battle. Full moon ceremonies sometimes honor her as a lunar deity, with participants wearing golden jewelry to mirror her famed necklace. There's even a growing trend of Freyja's Day rituals held on Fridays, tying her worship to the weekday that still bears her name. Perhaps most fascinating are the feminist reinterpretations of Freyja's myths. Where medieval texts sometimes painted her as scandalous, modern devotees see a goddess unapologetically in charge of her own destiny. The story of Brísingamen, for example, is now often framed as a bold reclaiming of agency, a divine being who refuses to let others dictate the terms of her desire. Meanwhile, her leadership of the Valkyries inspires contemporary women to see themselves as choosers of their own fates, not just in love but in every aspect of life. Archaeological finds, like amulets believed to depict her, have even become symbols in movements advocating for gender equality, merging ancient iconography with modern activism. Some practitioners take their devotion into daily life through small but meaningful acts. A heathen might wear a pendant of her falcon cloak as a reminder of personal transformation, while a Wiccan could plant a garden of Norse herbs associated with her, like mugwort or yarrow. Social media has fueled this revival, with online communities sharing poetry, art, and guided meditations centered on Freyja. There are even reconstructed chants based on Old Norse poetry, allowing worshippers to sing her praises in words that would have been familiar 1,000 years ago, yet feel just as powerful today. What's striking is how these modern practices both preserve and reimagine her worship. While they're rooted in historical research, they also adapt to contemporary values, making Freyja relevant to issues like body autonomy, mental resilience, and ecological harmony. Whether through solemn ritual or quiet personal reflection, she endures not as a relic of the past but as a dynamic force, proof that some deities never truly fade, only evolve. As we'll see next, even the myths of the world's end couldn't diminish her enduring presence, but that's a story for another secret. Now, shifting our gaze to the twilight of the gods, we uncover a curious mystery: Freyja's elusive role in Ragnarok. Unlike Thor, who battles the serpent Jörmungandr, or Odin, consumed by the wolf Fenrir, Freyja's presence in these apocalyptic prophecies is strikingly absent. This silence speaks volumes. In a cosmos where even the mightiest gods meet their end, her seeming exemption hints at something profound about her place in Norse belief. One compelling theory suggests Freyja's absence reflects her deep ties to cycles of life, death, and rebirth rather than finality. While Ragnarök depicts a linear, destructive climax, Freyja governs Folkvanga, a realm where the slain find renewal. Her domain operates outside the binary of victory and defeat, focusing instead on transformation. This aligns with her shamanic connections. Those who practice seiðr often work with liminal spaces, mediating between worlds rather than engaging in outright conflict. Her lack of a dramatic end in the myths might signal that her power transcends destruction altogether. Another angle points to her Vanir origins. As a goddess who came to the Aesir as part of a truce after the Aesir-Vanir War, she embodies reconciliation. The Vanir deities, associated with fertility and nature's rhythms, often symbolize continuity, while the Aesir gods, aligned with war and sovereignty, succumb to Ragnarök's violence. Freyja's lineage might spare her from this fate, underscoring Norse beliefs about different types of divine power. Some scholars argue her omission isn't accidental but deliberate, reflecting cultural priorities. Ragnarök's narrative, preserved by Christian-era scribes, emphasizes martial heroism, a sphere traditionally dominated by male gods. Freyja's domains of love, magic, and sovereignty may have been sidelined in favor of more epic battles. Yet archaeological finds, like amulets depicting her alongside Valkyries, suggest her role in guiding the dead remained vital in everyday worship, even if overlooked in eschatological myths. The most tantalizing interpretation: Freyja's survival is implied rather than stated. After Ragnarök, a new world emerges, and a few gods like Vidar and Vali endure to rebuild. As a goddess of fertility, Freyja's presence would be essential to this renewal, though the texts leave it unsaid. Modern heathens often see her as a beacon of resilience, a deity who, like the earth itself, persists beyond chaos. This quiet absence invites us to rethink Ragnarök's meaning. Perhaps Freyja's story wasn't about an ending but a reminder that some forces, love, magic, the earth's abundance, defy even the gods' twilight. This segues perfectly into our next secret, where we'll explore her island sanctuary, a place where her worship left indelible marks on the land itself. Now let's journey to a place where the whispers of Freyja's presence still linger, the windswept shores of Hlessi, known today as the Danish island of Liso. This secluded sanctuary, tucked away in the Kattegat Sea, might hold the key to understanding how deeply Freyja's worship was woven into the lives of the Norse people. Unlike the grand halls of Asgard, Freyja's connection to this island feels intimate, grounded in the rhythms of daily life and the sacred geography of the north. Archaeological clues paint a vivid picture. Excavations on Liso have uncovered artifacts that echo Freyja's domain's amber beads, often linked to her golden tears, and small figurines resembling the famed Relenge statuette, a probable depiction of the goddess. These finds suggest rituals honoring fertility and prosperity, fitting for a deity who governed both love and the harvest. But the most compelling evidence comes from medieval texts like the Gesta Danorum, where Saxo Grammaticus hints at a temple dedicated to Freyja on the island. Though the structure itself hasn't been found, local folklore speaks of a lady's mound, a site where offerings were once left for a powerful female figure. What makes Liso uniquely suited as Freyja's sanctuary? Geography offers a clue. Islands in Norse culture were liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds, and Freyja, as a practitioner of seiðr, thrived in such boundaries. The island's salt marshes, vital for preserving fish, might also have held spiritual significance. Salt was a precious commodity, traded like gold, and Freyja's association with wealth could extend to these natural resources. Imagine her devotees gathering here, praying for abundance, safe voyages, or love, their voices carried on the same sea winds that brought traders and tales from distant lands. Theories about Liso's role deepen when we consider Freyja's ties to the Disir, ancestral spirits she led. Some scholars propose the island was a gathering place for women's mysteries, where rites for the Disir and Freyja intertwined. This wouldn't be unusual. Norse women often presided over domestic rituals, and a remote island would offer privacy for ceremonies too potent for mainstream halls. Even today, place names on Liso like Frejlev, Freyja's inheritance, whisper of her legacy, yet mysteries remain. Why did this particular island become a focal point? One tantalizing idea connects it to Freyja's role as a guide to the afterlife. Liso's fog-shrouded coasts, visible yet elusive, might have symbolized Folkvanga's fleeting beauty, a place where the veil between life and death was thin. Whether through trade, tradition, or sheer spiritual magnetism, Freyja's presence here feels undeniable. As we turn next to the meanings hidden in her very name, we'll see how these threads of place and power converge in the goddess's identity. Now, let's unravel the layers hidden within Freyja's very name, a key that unlocks deeper understanding of her multifaceted identity. The meaning of her name isn't just a linguistic curiosity, it's a window into how different cultures and eras perceived her power. In Old Norse, Freyja is most commonly translated as Lady, a title of respect that underscores her high status among gods and mortals alike. But dig a little deeper and you'll find richer interpretations. Some scholars argue her name shares roots with the Old Norse word fru, meaning beloved or lover, highlighting her role as a goddess of passion and fertility. Yet there's another, more provocative possibility. In certain contexts, Freyja might derive from a term meaning mistress, not in the modern sense, but as a woman who commands authority over magic, war, and even life itself. These interpretations aren't just academic, they reflect how Freyja's worshippers saw her. In agrarian communities, Lady might have emphasized her connection to the land and harvest, while seafarers and warriors may have leaned into mistress for her dominion over fate and battle. Regional variations add even more nuance. In southern Scandinavia, for example, place names like Frøvi from Freyja Ve, meaning Freyja's sanctuary, suggest her veneration as a protective local deity. Meanwhile, Icelandic sagas often portray her with the more poetic lover, tying her to tales of romance and longing. the evolution of her name also mirrors societal shifts. Early Germanic tribes might have used Proto-Germanic Freyja, emphasizing her as a sovereign figure, while later Viking Age skalds played with kennings that called her Jefn, the giver, or Hern, flaxen-haired, weaving her into metaphors for wealth and beauty. Even the alternate spelling Freyja, popularized in modern times, reflects how her image adapts, softer to some ears, yet no less powerful. What's most fascinating is how these names weren't just labels but active reflections of her influence. When a farmer invoked Freyja the Lady, he might seek blessings for his fields. A warrior crying to Freyja the Mistress could be asking for courage or a place in folk Vanga. And a love-struck youth whispering Freyja the Lover may have hoped for her favor in matters of the heart. This fluidity shows why she endured. She wasn't just one goddess but many, meeting her followers where they needed her most. As we move next to her leadership of the mysterious Disir, we'll see how these name meanings converge in her role as a guide between worlds both divine and human. Now let's step into the shadowed halls of Norse belief, where Freyja's connection to the Disir reveals her profound role as a bridge between worlds. The Disir, often overshadowed by more famous figures like the Valkyries, were ancestral female spirits, guardians of families, lineages, and even entire communities. Imagine them as the collective memory of a people woven into the fabric of daily life. They were invoked during births, marriages, and deaths, their presence a thread linking the living to those who came before. And at the head of these powerful spirits stood Freyja, their leader and embodiment of their collective might. What's striking is how this role ties back to the many names we've just explored. As Lady, Freyja presided over the Disir as a matriarch, offering protection and wisdom. As Mistress, she commanded them with the authority of a war leader, especially during the wild, chaotic battles of fate. And as Lover, she infused their guidance with the warmth of kinship, reminding mortals that the Disir weren't distant specters but nurturing forebears. Archaeological finds like amulets and carvings depicting groups of women hint at how deeply this belief was rooted. In places like Sweden and Norway, offerings to the Disir, often of food, drink, or precious objects, were left at burial mounds or sacred stones, a tangible connection between the living and the ancestral spirits Freyja shepherded. The Disir weren't just passive figures, they actively shaped destinies. In the sagas, they appear in dreams or visions, warning of danger or foretelling triumphs. One chilling tale from Flateyjarbók describes a warrior visited by a Disir who predicts his death in battle, a fate even Odin couldn't alter. Here, Freyja's leadership takes on a darker hue. She doesn't just comfort, she delivers hard truths, showing her mastery over life's unyielding cycles. This duality is key. While Odin collected slain warriors for Valhalla, Freyja, through the Disir, watched over the entirety of a person's journey from cradle to grave and beyond. Her connection to them blurred the line between goddess and ancestor, suggesting that in some way, every woman who honored the Disir carried a spark of Freyja's power. Even today, traces survive in Scandinavian folklore. The Christmas tradition of leaving porridge for the house spirits might echo older offerings to the Disir, with Freyja's presence lingering in the rituals of remembrance. As we turn next to Freyja's mysterious magical song, consider how her bond with the Disir reveals a deeper truth. In Norse belief, the divine wasn't distant. It lived in the whispers of the past, guided by a goddess who walked both among the gods and the echoes of those who came before. Now, let's turn our attention to one of Freyja's most awe-inspiring abilities, her magical song, a power so potent it could literally move mountains. In the poetic Edda, there's a spellbinding moment where Freyja chants a song so powerful it causes the earth to tremble and rocks to split apart. This isn't just poetic exaggeration. It's a glimpse into how the Norse viewed her as a master of magic, capable of bending the natural world to her will. So what might this song have sounded like? While we don't have the exact melody, we can piece together clues from Norse magical traditions. Seiðr, the form of sorcery Freyja taught Odin, often involved chanting, drumming, and trance-like states to alter reality or see the future. Imagine a rhythmic, haunting melody layered with words of power, each syllable carrying weight, each note vibrating with intent. This wasn't mere music. It was a conduit for raw cosmic energy. Interestingly, we find parallels in the Sami joik singing practices of northern Scandinavia. The Sami, indigenous people with deep spiritual ties to the land, used joiks, songs that weren't just about a person, animal, or place, but were believed to embody them. A skilled joiker could summon storms, heal the sick, or communicate with spirits, much like Freyja's mountain-shaking chant. Both traditions share a belief in sound as a tangible force, a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. But Freyja's song goes even deeper. In the poetic Edda, her spell isn't just about destruction. It's linked to emotions, specifically her grief and rage over her missing husband, Arthur. When she sings, the earth doesn't just shake, it mourns with her. This ties into a broader Norse idea that powerful emotions could manifest in the physical world, like her golden tears becoming literal wealth. Her song isn't just magic, it's emotion made audible, a testament to how the Norse saw the divine as deeply personal, even vulnerable. Compare this to other Norse magical practices, like the Galdr spells. Incantations often screamed or whispered to curse enemies or protect warriors. Freyja's song stands apart because it's not transactional. It's an outpouring of her being, a raw expression of power that doesn't ask permission. What's fascinating is how this echoes in later folklore. Scandinavian tales speak of bergtanning, where mountain trolls or spirits lure people with enchanting songs. Could these stories be distant echoes of Freyja's magic, reshaped by time? Even today, the idea of a song so beautiful it alters reality lingers in our myths, proof of how deeply Freyja's legacy resonates. As we step into the next secret, keep in mind this duality. Freyja's song is both a weapon and a lament, a reminder that in Norse mythology, even the gods couldn't escape the weight of their own hearts. Now, let's uncover a side of Freyja that might surprise you: her deep ties to the earth and its bounty. While she's celebrated as a goddess of love and war, Freyja also holds a vital, often overlooked role as a guardian of harvests and fertility. This isn't just about romantic love, it's about the life-giving power of the land itself, a connection that roots her in the daily lives of Norse farmers and families. Picture this: fields ripe with grain, orchards heavy with fruit, and livestock thriving under the summer sun. For the Norse, these weren't just seasonal blessings. They were gifts from Freyja, who ensured the earth's fertility. Archaeological finds, like amulets depicting her with sheaves of wheat or surrounded by animals, hint at this agricultural role. These artifacts suggest her worship wasn't confined to grand temples but flourished in humble farmsteads, where people relied on her favor for survival. Here's where it gets fascinating. Freyja's link to fertility might stretch beyond Scandinavia. Some scholars see parallels between her and the Anglo-Saxon goddess Eostre, associated with spring and dawn. Eostre's festivals, celebrating renewal and rebirth, likely influenced what we now call Easter. Think eggs, rabbits, and blooming flowers, all symbols of fertility. Could Freyja and Eostre share a common ancestral root? Linguistic clues suggest yes. Both names might derive from Proto-Indo-European words for light or dawn, connecting them to cycles of growth and renewal. But Freyja's agricultural role isn't just symbolic. In Norse myths, her brother Freyja, the god of peace and plenty, is often credited with harvests, yet Freyja's presence is just as vital. Take the story of her golden boar, Hildisvíni. While it's easy to focus on its shimmering bristles, boars were also sacred to fertility rites across ancient Europe, symbols of abundance and strength. When Freyja rides Hildisvíni, she's not just a warrior or lover, she's a life-bringer, her power woven into the very soil. This duality, love and war, harvest and battle, shows how the Norse saw fertility as inseparable from strength. A thriving field required both tender care and fierce protection from storms or raiders. Freyja embodied that balance. Even her tears, turning to gold, mirror the alchemy of farming, sweat and toil transformed into wealth. As we move forward, remember this: Freyja wasn't just a distant figure of myth. She was as close as the bread on the table, the fruit in the bowl, a reminder that divinity for the Norse was as much in the earth as in the stars. Now, let's step away from the fields and into the world of Viking Age art, where Freyja's presence comes alive in stunning detail. Few artifacts capture her essence as vividly as the small bronze figurine discovered in Rellinge, Sweden. This tiny statue, no taller than your hand, shows a seated woman with an elaborate headdress, clutching what might be a cup or a symbol of power. Her posture is regal, her expression commanding, an unmistakable depiction of a goddess. But what makes this figure so special? For starters, she's adorned with a necklace, a clear nod to Freyja's legendary Brísingamen. The craftsmanship is deliberate, linking her to wealth, status, and divine authority. This figurine isn't just art, it's a window into how ordinary Norse people connected with Freyja. Unlike the grand carvings of gods like Odin or Thor in temples, this piece feels personal, something you might keep in your home or wear as an amulet. Archaeologists believe such figurines were used in household rituals, perhaps to invoke Freyja's blessings for fertility, protection, or even love. The fact that it survived centuries buried in the earth suggests it was treasured, a sacred object passed down through generations. Then there's the Galahus horn, another fascinating artifact. Though it was stolen and melted down in the 19th century, detailed sketches remain. One panel shows a woman with a staff surrounded by animals. Some scholars argue this could be Freyja in her role as a seeress practicing seiðr magic. The imagery aligns with descriptions of her in the sagas, where she's often linked to prophecy and transformation. These depictions reinforce her duality, a goddess who could command the battlefield one moment and divine the future the next. But art from the Viking Age doesn't just show Freyja, it hides her too. Take the Oseberg ship burial, where tapestries feature processions of women in long dresses, some holding spears or riding chariots. While none are explicitly labeled as Freyja, the motifs warrior women, cats, and elaborate textiles echo her known symbols. This ambiguity is telling. Freyja's influence may have been so woven into daily life that her presence didn't always need naming. People just knew. What's striking is how these artifacts defy modern stereotypes. Freyja isn't reduced to a single role. In one carving, she's a nurturer, in another, a warrior, sometimes she's both. This fluidity reflects how the Norse saw their gods not as rigid archetypes, but as forces that flowed through every aspect of existence. From the humblest farm to the grandest longhouse, Freyja was there, her image a reminder of the divine in the everyday. So the next time you picture the Viking Age, don't just imagine raids and runestones. Think of a woman in Sweden holding a small bronze figure and whispering a prayer to Freyja. That's where mythology truly lived, not in books but in the hands and hearts of those who believed. Now, let's address one of the most misunderstood aspects of Freyja's character, her so-called promiscuity. Medieval Christian writers, often hostile to pagan beliefs, painted Freyja as lustful and immoral, a deliberate distortion of her true role in Norse culture. But when we peel back these biased layers, we find a goddess whose sexuality was celebrated, not shamed. In Norse society, Freyja's autonomy over love and desire wasn't scandalous. It was sacred. Take the myth of Brísingamen, where she acquires her legendary necklace by sleeping with 4 dwarves. Christian scholars later twisted this into a tale of indecency, but the original context reveals something far more profound. Freyja didn't act out of weakness or manipulation. She bargained on her own terms, using her body as a form of power and agency. a concept foreign to medieval Christian morality but perfectly aligned with Viking Age values. Archaeological clues support this. Amulets and carvings depicting Freyja often emphasize her fertility, but never with the lewd overtones added by later writers. The Relange figurine, for instance, shows her with a prominent necklace and seated posture, symbols of dignity and authority. Contrast this with medieval art where female sexuality was either sanitized or vilified. The Norse didn't share these hang-ups. To them, Freyja's allure was divine, a force that could shape destinies. Even her tears held power. When Freyja weeps golden tears for her missing husband Other, it's not a sign of helplessness. Gold, the ultimate symbol of wealth and status, flows from her grief. This poetic metaphor tells us something crucial. In Norse eyes, emotion and eroticism weren't weaknesses. They were sources of strength intertwined with fate and fortune. Christian missionaries, however, couldn't reconcile this worldview. They recast Freyja as a cautionary tale, a pagan Eve. Snorri Sturluson, writing centuries after Scandinavia's conversion, sometimes echoes this bias, downplaying her complexity, but the older myths resist simplification. Freyja chooses lovers, commands Valkyries, and even teaches Odin magic, all without apology. The truth is, Freyja's sexuality wasn't controversial until outsiders made it so. In her original context, she embodied what the Norse admired: independence, vitality, and the unashamed embrace of life's pleasures. To reduce her to medieval caricatures is to miss the point entirely. She wasn't wanton, she was whole. Now, here's a twist in Freyja's story that even many mythology fans overlook: her unexpected connection to Thor's legendary hammer, Mjolnir. You might think these two Norse gods operate in entirely separate realms, but dig a little deeper, and you'll find Freyja's influence in one of mythology's most famous weapons. The story begins with Loki's mischief, as it often does. When the trickster cuts off the golden hair of Thor's wife, Sif, he's forced to make amends by commissioning the dwarves to craft new treasures for the gods. But here's where Freyja comes in. To create Mjolnir, the dwarves demand Freyja's necklace, Brísingamen, as part of their price. Why? Because its magic is so potent that even the master craftsmen recognize its worth. Loki, ever the schemer, steals it from her, setting off a chain of events that leads to the hammer's creation. Now, this isn't just a footnote in Norse myth. It's a testament to Freyja's far-reaching power. Her necklace isn't merely jewelry, it's a symbol of her autonomy, a treasure so coveted that even the gods and dwarves acknowledge its value. Without it, Mjolnir might never have been forged. Think about that. Thor's iconic weapon, the one he uses to defend Asgard, owes its existence in part to Freyja. But there's another layer here. The myth subtly reinforces Freyja's role as a linchpin in the Norse pantheon. While Thor is the thunder-wielding protector, Freyja's magic and possessions are what enable his strength. It's a reminder that in Norse mythology, power isn't just about brute force. Sometimes it's the quieter, more intricate influences like a goddess's necklace that shape the fate of the gods. And let's not forget the irony. Loki, who often undermines the gods, becomes the unlikely middleman in this exchange. His theft of Brísingamen forces the dwarves' hand, proving that even chaos has its purpose. Yet it's Freyja's loss and later her reclaiming of the necklace that completes the cycle. She's not passive in this drama. She's a driving force even when she's not center stage. So the next time you picture Thor swinging Mjolnir, remember Freyja's hidden role in its creation. It's a perfect example of how interconnected Norse myths truly are, and how Freyja's influence stretches far beyond love and war, right into the heart of Asgard's greatest legends. Now let's journey beyond the battlefield of Valhalla and into the quieter, yet equally profound realms Freyja presides over in the afterlife. While Odin claims half the slain warriors for his hall, Freyja welcomes the other half into Folkvanga, her own sacred field. But Folkvanga isn't just a mirror image of Valhalla. It's a place of rest, reunion, and renewal, reflecting her dual roles as a goddess of war and fertility. Picture this: instead of endless feasting and battle, Folkvangr is described as a lush meadow where the dead find peace under Freyja's gentle guidance. Her hall, Sessrúmnir, stands here, a place of warmth and comfort. Unlike Valhalla's emphasis on eternal combat, Folkvangr suggests a more balanced afterlife, where warriors aren't just honored for their strength but also for their humanity. This duality speaks volumes about Norse beliefs. Death wasn't just about glory, but also about returning to a state of harmony. Interestingly, Freyja's connection to the afterlife might have roots older than the Viking Age. Scholars have noted striking parallels between Folkvangr and the Celtic otherworld, a realm of eternal youth and abundance. Both cultures envisioned afterlife fields where time stood still and the land itself provided solace. Could this be evidence of ancient cultural exchange? Archaeological finds, like shared artistic motifs across Norse and Celtic regions, suggest these ideas might have intertwined over centuries of trade and interaction. But Freyja's influence doesn't stop at Folkvangr. She's also linked to the Disir, ancestral female spirits who guarded families and lineages. As their leader, Freyja bridges the gap between the living and the dead, offering protection and wisdom across generations. This role hints at a broader spiritual truth in Norse belief. The afterlife wasn't just a distant reward, but a continuum where ancestors remained actively involved in the lives of their descendants. What's truly fascinating is how these concepts challenge modern stereotypes of Viking culture. We often imagine the Norse obsessed with battle and Valhalla, but Freyja's realms reveal a deeper, more nuanced view of existence. Death wasn't just an end or a ticket to eternal combat. It was a transition to another kind of life, one where Freyja's compassion and power ensured balance. So, the next time you hear about Valhalla, remember Folkvangr and the goddess who rules it. Her afterlife isn't just a footnote, it's a testament to the Norse understanding of death as something complex, sacred, and deeply connected to the cycles of nature and family. And that's a secret worth remembering. Now, let's step beyond myth and into history, where Freyja's legacy might have been shaped by real women of power. While she reigns as a goddess in the sagas, some scholars believe her character could have been inspired by influential Viking Age women, figures whose lives blurred the line between the divine and the mortal. One of the most compelling examples comes from a stunning archaeological find, the Oseberg ship burial in Norway. Discovered in 1904, this lavishly decorated Viking ship held the remains of two women, one of whom was buried with such extraordinary wealth and ritual significance that experts speculate she might have been a priestess of Freyja. The grave goods tell a story of reverence, ornate tapestries depicting goddess-like figures, a ceremonial cart possibly used in processions, and even a staff often linked to seiðr magic, Freyja's signature practice. The younger woman's opulent burial suggests she was no ordinary noble. She may have been a spiritual leader, a living embodiment of Freyja's earthly influence. But the Oseberg burial isn't the only clue. Across Scandinavia, high-status graves of women from the Viking Age often include artifacts tied to Freyja's domains, amulets of her signature Brísingamen necklace, figurines of cats, her sacred animals, and symbols of fertility and seiðr. These burials hint at a society where women held significant religious authority, perhaps serving as intermediaries between the people and the gods. Could these women have been the templates for Freyja's enduring myths? The connection grows even more intriguing when we examine historical accounts of the Volva, Norse seeresses who practiced seiðr. These wandering prophetesses, described in sagas as wearing falcon cloaks, just like Freyja's, were feared and respected for their ability to see the future. Their rituals, involving chanting and trance states, mirror the magic Freyja taught Odin. Some historians argue that the Volva's societal role preserved echoes of an earlier, goddess-centered tradition, one that Freyja may have personified. What's striking is how these historical threads challenge stereotypes of Viking women as merely wives or warriors. The Oseberg priestess and the Volva suggest a third path: women as keepers of sacred knowledge, wielders of mystical power, and perhaps even the living roots of a goddess's legend. Whether Freyja's myth grew from their stories or simply reflected their spiritual roles, one thing is clear: the Norse world had space for women who commanded respect in realms beyond the battlefield. So next time you picture Freyja, remember the Oseberg ship and the women who might have carried her spirit. History and myth, it seems, are closer than we think, and the line between a goddess and her worshippers can be wonderfully thin. Now, shifting our focus from historical figures to the natural world, let's explore the fragrant and mystical realm of Freyja's sacred plants. The Norse didn't just worship their gods through grand rituals. They intertwined divinity with the very herbs beneath their feet, and Freyja's connection to flora reveals a fascinating layer of her spirituality. Among the most compelling evidence are the botanical remains found in Norse burial sites, particularly mayweed, a plant with tiny white flowers that's been discovered tucked into graves alongside high-status women. Mayweed, known scientifically as matricaria, wasn't just a decorative touch. This humble plant packs a potent double punch. It's both a powerful anti-inflammatory and a mild psychoactive. In the Viking Age, it was likely brewed into teas or crushed into poultices, used to ease pain or induce altered states during seiðr rituals. Imagine a Volva, Freyja's priestess, sipping a steaming cup before entering a trance, her visions guided by the same plant that might have lined Freyja's own mythical garden. The presence of mayweed in graves suggests it was a bridge between healing and the divine, a tool to channel Freyja's magic in life and beyond. But mayweed wasn't alone. Henbane, another plant linked to Norse magic, appears in archaeological records with even stronger psychoactive properties. Ancient texts describe its use in flying ointments, salves that could induce vivid hallucinations, perhaps explaining accounts of seers journeying to other realms. While not exclusively tied to Freyja, its association with trance work fits neatly into her domain as the teacher of seiðr. Then there's vervain, a herb celebrated across Europe for its purifying qualities, often woven into charms for love or protection. Given Freyja's dual roles in love and warfare, it's easy to see how vervain might have adorned altars in her name. What's striking is how these plants reflect Freyja's multifaceted nature. Mayweed's healing properties align with her nurturing side, while henbane's mind-altering effects mirror her shamanic power. Even the act of gathering these herbs would have been sacred, a practice possibly overseen by women, echoing Freyja's role as a guardian of feminine mysteries. Archaeological finds in Scandinavia show grinding stones stained with plant residues, hinting at meticulous preparation for rituals we can only partially reconstruct. The deeper we dig into Freyja's botanical legacy, the more we see a goddess deeply rooted quite literally in the natural world. These plants weren't just symbols, they were active participants in worship, blurring the line between medicine and magic. Whether calming a fever or opening doors to the spirit world, they carried Freyja's essence in their leaves and petals. So the next time you spot a patch of wild mayweed, remember, you might be looking at a living remnant of her ancient cult, a whisper of the divine in the everyday. Now let's wander into the shadowy forests of Scandinavian folklore, where Freyja's presence lingers in whispers and legends long after the Viking Age faded. Though Christianity swept across the north, the goddess never truly vanished. She simply shape-shifted, weaving herself into tales of supernatural beings like the Huldra, a mysterious forest spirit with a crown of flowers and a hollow back. On the surface, she seems like just another folkloric figure, but dig deeper and you'll find echoes of Freyja's magic. The Huldra, often described as a beautiful woman luring hunters into the woods, embodies Freyja's duality, alluring yet dangerous, a guardian of nature's secrets. Like Freyja, she's linked to fertility and untamed wildness, but with a Christian-era twist. Her hollow back symbolizes the emptiness of pagan beliefs in the new religious order. Yet the parallels are unmistakable. Both Freyja and the Huldra command respect, both blur the line between benevolence and peril, and both are deeply tied to the land. This wasn't accidental. When old gods couldn't be worshipped openly, they survived in disguised forms, their stories retold as cautionary fables or fairy tales. But the Huldra isn't the only echo of Freyja. Consider the Swedish Vitra, ethereal beings who protected farms and livestock, much like Freyja's role as a bringer of prosperity. Or the Norwegian Huldrafolk, hidden people said to dwell in mounds, their elegance and otherworldly grace reminiscent of Freyja's Vanir heritage. Even the tradition of leaving butter or cream as offerings to these beings mirrors ancient sacrifices to Freyja for fertile fields and healthy herds. The rituals changed, but the intent stayed the same, to honor forces older than memory. What's fascinating is how these stories reveal the resilience of belief. In Iceland, accounts of trollkonur troll women performing seiðr magic surface well into the 18th century, a direct line to Freyja's shamanic traditions. Meanwhile, Danish folk charms invoking the Lady of the Linen to bless childbirth recall Freyja's patronage of women's crafts and fertility. This wasn't mere superstition, it was cultural memory dressed in new robes. Archaeology backs this up. Amulets once dedicated to Freyja, like those depicting cats or boars, reappear in medieval context as protective charms against evil. A church wall in Sweden even hides a carved image of a woman riding a cat, a cheeky nod to Freyja's chariot, tucked where only the knowing would see. The message is clear: the goddess endured not in temples but in hearths and hushed stories. So why does this matter? Because it shows how folklore isn't just entertainment, it's a living archive. When a Norwegian farmer left a bowl of porridge for the Huldra, or a midwife whispered Freyja's forgotten name during labor, they kept a spark of the old world alive. And in that spark we glimpse the real secret: Freyja was never overthrown. She simply stepped into the shadows, waiting for those who still knew how to listen. Now, let's turn our gaze upward to the night sky, where Freyja's legacy might be written among the stars. While Norse mythology doesn't spell out her celestial connections as explicitly as other pantheons, scholars have long debated whether the Vikings saw Freyja in the glittering patterns above. One compelling theory links her to the constellation we now call Orion. Picture this: the Hunter's Belt, those three bright stars in a row, could have been imagined as Freyja's gleaming necklace Brísingamen draped across the heavens. The sword hanging from Orion's belt might even mirror the weaponry of a goddess who walked battlefields as readily as she presided over love. But the stargazing doesn't stop there. Venus, the morning and evening star, has also been tied to Freyja, and for good reason. Just as Venus cycles between dusk and dawn, Freyja straddles dual realms: war and peace, life and death, the visible and the unseen. In Roman mythology, Venus is the goddess of love, much like Freyja, but the Norse took it further. They may have viewed Venus's brilliance as Freyja's golden tears, spilled for her missing husband, Arthur, shimmering in the twilight. This poetic connection between celestial motion and myth isn't unique to the Norse, but it shows how they wove their gods into the fabric of the cosmos. What's especially fascinating is how these interpretations align with Norse navigation and timekeeping. Viking sailors relied on stars to guide their longships, and linking constellations to deities like Freyja would have made the vast, unpredictable sea feel more sacred and more navigable. Imagine a trader crossing the North Sea, spotting Orion rising in winter and taking it as a sign of Freyja's protection over his journey, or a farmer planting crops when Venus appeared at dawn, invoking her fertility blessings. The stars weren't just maps, they were divine messages. Archaeology offers tantalizing clues too. Artifacts like the Germanic Nebra sky disk, though predating the Viking Age, show how deeply early Northern Europeans studied the heavens. Later, medieval Icelandic texts refer to Freyja's distaff, an Old Norse name for the Orion constellation, hinting at a folk memory of her cosmic role. Even the timing of Norse festivals, like the winter solstice, aligns with celestial events that may have been tied to her myths. So why does this starry connection matter? Because it reveals how the Norse saw their gods not as distant figures, but as forces woven into the natural world, right down to the flickering lights above. Whether as Orion's glittering jewels or Venus's golden glow, Freyja's presence in the sky reminds us that for the Vikings, the divine was never far away. It was etched in the night, waiting to be read by those who knew her stories. And as we'll see next, her influence didn't fade with the Vikings. It simply found new forms in modernity. Moving beyond the ancient skies, let's explore how Freyja's legacy continues to captivate modern audiences through her appearances in today's pop culture. From comic books to blockbuster video games, she's been reimagined in ways that both honor and distort her Norse roots. Take Marvel Comics, for example, where Freyja, often spelled Frigga, appears as Thor's mother. While this version captures her wisdom and maternal warmth, it merges her with Frigg, Odin's wife, blurring the distinct roles these goddesses played in original myths. The Marvel Universe downplays Freyja's fierce independence and her dominion over love and war, opting instead for a more subdued, queenly figure. It's a classic case of simplification for storytelling's sake, but it misses the complexity that made her so compelling to the Vikings. Then there's God of War, the hit video game series that brings Norse mythology to life with stunning visuals. Here, Freyja is portrayed as a grieving mother and powerful sorceress, echoing her mythological ties to magic and loss. The game nails her connection to seiðr and her emotional depth, especially in her quest to avenge her son Baldur. But it also takes creative liberties, casting her as an antagonist at times, a far cry from the goddess who was celebrated for her balance of compassion and strength. While the portrayal is gripping, it leans into modern tropes of vengeful woman rather than honoring her multifaceted divinity. Even in literature, authors like Neil Gaiman have reworked her stories. In Norse mythology, Gaiman retains her autonomy and sensuality, staying closer to the Edda's spirit. Yet, like all retellings, it's filtered through a contemporary lens, emphasizing her agency in ways that resonate with modern feminist readings. This highlights an ongoing tension: how to adapt ancient deities for today's audiences without losing their original essence. Freyja's influence stretches into music too. Scandinavian folk bands like Wardruna weave her myths into their lyrics, evoking her ties to nature and fate. Meanwhile, fantasy tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons cast her as a deity of love and war, staying surprisingly true to her dual roles. These depictions, though varied, show how her archetype, the powerful, independent goddess, still sparks creativity across mediums. So what do these modern takes get right? They capture her magnetism and power, even if they cherry-pick traits for dramatic effect. Where they often falter is in reducing her to a single note, love or war, mother or witch, when her mythos thrived on paradox. The real Freyja was unapologetically complex, a goddess who defied easy categories. As we wrap up our journey through her secrets, that's the lesson to carry forward. Mythology isn't static. It evolves just as our understanding of figures like Freyja continues to grow, one retelling at a time. As we come to the end of our journey through the secrets of Freyja, let's take a moment to reflect on what makes her such a captivating figure in Norse mythology. She isn't just a goddess of love or a warrior, she's both and so much more. Freyja embodies contradictions that feel almost human. She's fierce yet compassionate, divine yet deeply emotional, a ruler of the afterlife and a weaver of magic. This complexity is what has kept her stories alive for centuries, resonating with people across time and cultures. Think about it. How many mythological figures can claim dominion over love, war, fertility, death, and magic all at once? Freyja's duality isn't a flaw, it's her strength. She doesn't fit neatly into boxes, and that's precisely why she stands out. Whether she's choosing slain warriors for her whole folkvanger, weeping golden tears for her lost husband, or teaching Odin the secrets of seiðr, she defies simple labels. And that's what makes her relatable. In a way, she mirrors our own messy, multifaceted lives full of passion, grief, power, and vulnerability. It's no wonder she's endured in modern retellings, even if those adaptations sometimes flatten her into simpler versions. From the Vikings to today's screens, people are drawn to her because she represents something rare, a goddess who isn't just powerful but unapologetically herself. She's not sidelined as someone's wife or mother. She's the protagonist of her own myths, making choices that shape the Norse cosmos. So here's my question for you. Which of Freyja's secrets surprised you the most? Was it her connection to Egyptian trade routes, her role as leader of the Valkyries, or perhaps her scandalous acquisition of Brísingamen? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear which parts of a story resonated with you. And if this deep dive into Norse mythology left you hungry for more, don't stop here. The sagas are full of gods, giants, and heroes waiting to be discovered. Before you go, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more myths, legends, and hidden histories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of Freyja, the goddess who reminds us that strength and softness, war and love can coexist in one extraordinary figure. Until next time, keep wondering, and uncovering the stories that shape our world.